Welcome to Power Up Podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, Amma Rouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Ella Mesmer, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up.
I did a comedy show the other day, Amma, like me on the stage, spitting lyrics, or not quite lyrics, but saying hopefully funny things into a microphone in Bradford.
Gosh, that fills me with fear and also complete awe that you did that, because stand-up comedy is not something that is easy to do. And I also know your journey with standing up on stage with microphones, singing, or kind of like using your voice in that way where all eyes are on you. How the hell did you do this, and how the hell did it come about?
Yeah, it feels huge. I was also really scared, but I basically just kept on rephrasing it as I'm really excited.
I love that.
And I think the really important thing to say is I know that I don't want to be a comedian. It's not something where I'm like, this is my new profession. It's something that kind of my intuition told me this is true for you to do, really to overcome your fear and turn it into excitement. Because I think, I don't know if you remember, in 2014, I had a big talk as part of I was on the kind of female choreographers program called The Bench.
Yeah.
And I had to do that talk, had to do a big talk in the Hippodrome in Birmingham in front of kind of loads of producers and, people.
Did you?
Yeah. And that was the first, up until then, I'd managed to basically dodge all public speaking opportunities in my life ever. And I was cold sweats at night, nightmares. It really was. It took me about 3 months to prepare myself for that experience.
For the bench experience.
For the bench experience. And so it feels really huge to have got to here now where I did a comedy show. And why are we talking about comedy on an episode about slow fashion? Well, would you like to hear my story?
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
What is the intersection here? I want to know.
So also in Bradford, and it was like maybe a month or 2 months before this kind of comedy opportunity came round, I had just stepped off of a train. And funny, another sub story that I won't go into now, but I just found out that I've got all this family in Yorkshire, etc. As you know, lots of Amma.
Yeah.
And I spotted this sign that said "Welcome Home, Sexy," and I was like, I just need a selfie in front of this "Welcome Home, Sexy" sign. So I'd posed in front of this "Welcome Home, Sexy" sign. But basically, as I squatted down, I was wearing a pair of Lucy and Yak dungarees that I absolutely love and had for many years. As I stood up, that pair of Lucy and Yak dungarees basically ripped from one side to the other, completely exposed my bottom.
No.
Yeah. Uh-oh. And for the listener, Lucy and Yak are actually very kind of conscious about their fashion. They're Yorkshire based, but they have they create a lot of their products in India, but I have done a lot of research on them, and I know that they're very kind of forward thinking in the way they approach their fashion, and that it's very conscious, and they kind of their story, you get to know who's making your outfit and so on. But basically on this day in Bradford, I urgently needed some clothes because I was going to teach at Carla Sangam, which is a wonderful theatre there. And I had a big hole in my ass. And so, I went to H&M, and I'd spotted, like, you know, this was kind of the start of this awakening of me starting to think about, so those who know me, you know, I've been a vegetarian basically most of my life. And then this sort of, I'm going towards, I usually say I eat vegan, but I also honor that I'm not someone who, you know, for example, last week I went for dinner at somebody's house, and I'm not going to be someone who will say I won't eat vegetarian. If the person says you're vegetarian, aren't you, just cook me something. I prefer to kind of be able to participate in life in that way. So that's kind of my journey. But, you know, I'm just starting to think a lot more about things. And at this stage, I've sort of started to be just thinking a lot more about, it's not only, you know, it's not only the food we eat, there's all these other layers of things that might go on, and that kind of chain of events that have happened before you get the product. But anyway, so I went into H&M, and I basically found this kind of brand that they have, which is called Conscious Fashion. And so I basically like bought quite a few bits because I was like, oh, cool. It's like sustainable, and it's kind of in line with the things that I've been thinking. And then I kind of dove down the rabbit hole once I'd bought these items, and once I'd taught my workshop, and basically started to realize that it was just a sort of gimmick. You know, it's like a sort of thing that they're saying, but actually they're really not. They're really not doing. So this comedy act, we were invited by the wonderful Dr. Natalie Diddons to perform these comedy sketches that had to be about kind of something that we were passionate about, and something that you wanted to stand up for. And I thought, let's just play with this, because there was something in that consciously unconscious. You know, I just wanted to play with this kind of play on words. And I had a lot of fun actually doing the comedy act. But the real reason we are here, Amma, is to talk about the fast and the slow fashion, right? So shall we move to this?
But can I just ask? I just want to know, because now I'm really curious. How did you? Because I guess because it's a important topic. So slow fashion, fast fashion. It's an important topic, and well, how did you approach your first comedy show? How did you approach kind of bringing satire to that subject area? How did you find like weaving it in, and how did the audience receive it?
I mean, the audience were the best, but I think they were a very loving, kind audience, because we were all people who were trying comedy for the first time. And so I feel like we had a wonderful audience. I also think everyone was actually really funny, and the range of topics and so on. It was just wonderful. And it also made me think, I really like comedy where you can laugh, you know, you can have your light relief, like, you know, a lot of my light relief. So I played with this whole idea that the conscious fashion could actually speak, and we were like having conversations. It was so, you know, it was so silly, and it really opened my mind to how much, you know, like there's the reality of the thing, and then there's like how much do we just open our mind to create humor and to allow those moments for the audience to laugh and so on. But yeah, what I really learned was that there was kind of an element of not resolving the tension of the discomfort that, for example, that topic brings up in all of us, and also being okay that you can have the moments of humor, and then you can also have those moments where you're like, yeah, actually that really pisses me off. Like one person did, she did a wonderful sketch about abortion, and you know, it was very current at the time that we were doing the act. And but I think there's something about creating the humor around a topic that you're really passionate about, that's actually, when done well, of course, because you know, we can also it's definitely scary. I think that's why I chose this topic, because I didn't want to go for something, I wanted to go for something that I could kind of find lightness in, as well as, you know, the real serious, because it is a very serious, like, you know, the stuff that I've been reading. So one of my I've got this little app on my phone now, it's called Good on You, that I basically, like, when I want to buy something beautiful, you know, I love clothes. I'm not a big shopper, Like, I'm not someone who loves to go out shopping for the day, but I do really love nice clothing. But I really love that with this little app, you can just look up and you can actually see the breakdown, the statistics of like, what does that
Oh,
company do? Yeah,
amazing.
so I would definitely recommend that to all listeners out there. But yeah, you know, as I kind of dived into it, it's similar to, there was a moment when I first learned that prawns was actually connected. There was a sort of a trail that you could follow to human slavery, which was like just so shocking to realize. So I was a pescatarian for many years, and then went to vegetarian, and then went to vegan. Or what I say, I eat vegan as often as I can, but I will allow for that kind of flexibility. And I suppose, like, I think it's really hard in our world. What do you think about this, Amo? Of like, sometimes I'm like, you can't always know the backstory of that thing that you're buying into. You know, be that like something you buy from the supermarket, or I don't know, maybe a bike, or you know, like there's so many layers of how do we actually know where the trail goes.
Yeah, and yeah, where it begins, and like what, and also how to make the most informed choices, because sometimes we think we're making really informed choices, like the example you gave, and then you find out, oh, actually, I'm not. Um, or even there's a game called How Bad Are Bananas that is a sustainable game that we have a setup and store to play it on the Impact Festival Hub, which is Hannah Bertram's Sustainable Arts Festival. And they're monthly pop-up hubs, and there's a game called How Bad Are Bananas. The aim of the game is you have lots of different picture cards with different objects or different foods on them. You group them into fours, and in each group, you get to see the images and you get to decide which you feel has the highest level of CO2, the highest level of carbon footprint, and the lowest. And you put them in order, and you do that across the table with all the different groups, and then they're revealed, they're turned over, and then the carbon footprint is revealed. And it just blew my mind, some of the things I thought would have had a much lower carbon footprint in relation to something else in their group, and it was much higher. So for example, I think one of them was buying British cherry tomatoes out of season in the UK, and buying another variety of tomato out of the UK. And I thought, oh, definitely the one from out of the UK is going to have the higher carbon footprint because of the way it's packaged, because of its journey, because of this, because of that. But actually, buying cherry tomatoes, even though they're grown in the UK, out of season, had a much higher carbon footprint.
Wow, I'd love to know the details of the why of that. That is so.
Yeah, there's also a book called How Bad Are Bananas, so that will have a lot of information in there. But that game was mind blowing for me. It was really, really
Yeah.
interesting and informative in terms of, okay, what small choices can I even start to make
Mm,
to have more of a positive impact on the world, and to bring more
yeah.
sustainability into my everyday practices. Now I have this information. And so I think there's a
Mm,
lot in the conversation about seeking out the information or going toward the information when it's presented to us, and then absorbing as much of it as we can, and then seeing how that
mm,
can inform our choices. And it's the same with
yeah.
fashion and clothing, isn't it?
Totally. And even that actually, so so since then, since that kind of moment when I ripped my trousers, I kind of made a promise to myself to basically buy slow fashion. And I do, I also admit, like, sometimes it's just not possible. I've had one occasion where there were certain things I just couldn't find anywhere / actually afford from a slow fashion
Mm-hmm.
provider versus a fast fashion provider. And I've kind of, maybe I haven't quite made my peace with that. But anyway, this kind of like first purchase I bought of like, okay, I'm going to buy some slow fashion. And I was so excited about my purchases. But then basically what I hadn't realized was, of course, then now they're flying it. well, not of course, but this company was from Sweden, so they had to fly. And I was like, oh my God, there's just so many layers,
To
to
take
this,
into
like,
account. And
yeah,
actually, which is still giving you the lower carbon footprint kind of with the
right.
choice, and how do you find that
Yeah,
out? And
yeah.
yeah,
And even how do you know, like I bought a kind of a yoga outfit on Etsy, and I messaged the person and just like did a bit of a um
like a
is this like,
sustainability check almost.
yeah, and the person told me yes, it's all really sustainable, but I still thought, how do we know if, for example, H&M say that their conscious brand is conscious, right? But actually when you put it onto Good On You, you can see that it's not actually conscious. So I just think I'm very glad to be awakening, but I think it's actually a slow, it's a slow and gradual journey. Mm,
I think there's also something in how you use your clothes and how you treat your clothes. Um, in terms of, when I say that, I mean how you choose to engage with your clothing. So I think that's twofold. When generally, I think when we purchase slow fashion, whether that's a garment that's already made, or whether it's you buy fabric and you have it made for you by a seamstress or a tailor, which I think for me is probably like the ultimate slow fashion. Um,
yeah.
the way you treat it and how you wear it and how you keep it and how you regard it tends to be with a lot
Mm,
more love and care and
so
consideration,
true.
yeah, and weight than maybe something that you just picked up from, chain store that was like a fiver, that you feel like it's kind of disposable, more
Hmm.
fast fashion. I think there's that angle to it. Um, for example, I have a knit dress that I bought in a small city called Trinidad in Cuba. And I will always, the way I handle that and look after that and cherish that
Hmm.
is, I know I'm not going to get it ever again. It was hand knitted.
Photos, please.
I will send photos. It's one of my favorite dresses, and it feels like it was made for me. It
Oh, that's so
wasn't, but it
nice.
was. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, I want that. That I love that. I want
Yes.
it, and it's something I feel I will always have, and I'm really
Mm.
considerate and careful with how I treat it and how often I wear it, and it's something I would never imagine giving away. Whereas versus some of the fast fashion I have, I know I don't have that relationship with some of those pieces. However, that said, I was saying this is twofold. The other way of understanding um, the angle of it also comes down to how we treat our clothing is that you can also choose to treat fast fashion with that consideration and that care. If it's a piece of clothing that you've bought, but you still can give it the same love, the still same cherishing, the same consideration. Um, you can wear it with multiple outfits in multiple ways. You can choose to do that. Sometimes the actual quality of the clothing won't sustain, of course, which is part of the argument. But sometimes it will. And I have some fast fashion pieces I've had since I was 19. It's a
That is
long
so cool.
time, and I still
They are
love
getting
them
the
and I
love.
still wear them and I love them and they're still going really well. So I
Yeah.
think, there's a responsibility there that if we do have fast fashion and if we are making those purchases, then how are we engaging with that fashion once we get it home and once it's part of our wardrobe?
It's making me think, one, about, charity shopping. That's been a big
Hmm.
kind of eye opener. Like, I always shopped in charity shops,
Yeah,
but this year
same.
I've been much more kind of conscious about, actually, yeah, that then I might buy some fast fashion pieces that I really love because there they are in that shop and they've been pre-loved.
Mm,
Um, but also, the Marie Kondo thing of like just the joy and the love of like how you wrap that thing and you put it in your wardrobe and that energy. And also the thing of, I know that people like, I have a friend who was saying to me, a wonderful friend who was saying to me the other day that she went through a phase where she had this idea that she could only wear an outfit once. And if you are gonna say goodbye to a piece, then how do you get rid of that piece? Like, here where I am, there's quite a few kind of clothing banks where you can take your old clothes. I mean, in next week's episode, we will talk some more about this, but, you know, there's also a lot of evidence that those clothes that we think that we're kind of like giving to charity, for example, can actually end up in landfills in another country. So, yeah, there's just so many layers of the unlearning. And, you know, I'm so glad that we have these wonderful guests.
I've discovered that recently as well. But before you become aware of that, you don't know.
Unconsciously unconscious. Yeah, so I played with that a lot in that sketch as well, about, you know, how H&M are actually consciously unconscious. But yeah, like, you know, it is, you're right, it's like awakening up, and it's a process of the kind of the shock, and then the learning, and then the re-educating, and like, how do we do these things?
Yeah.
And I think
and how and where do you go after that? Like, okay, so if I can't take my clothes to that clothes bank because it's not going where I think, and if I can't take it that particular shop, okay, what do I do with it? You know, I think that's a big question mark for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think for me, ultimately, it's that choice that I only want to buy slow fashion moving forwards. But I also, yeah, it's definitely a process. Like, one of the wonderful things we did with the company was we this year's show we made from all recycled materials, and we kind of reused things that were from other shows and put them into the show.
Amazing.
So that's been really beautiful.
Which show was that you used recycled?
That's the Rainbow Butterfly. Yeah, so you'll see, for those listeners watching, like we have this big maypole in the show with lots of bits of fabric, and then those bits of fabric went back into the crash mat, and, you know, there's kind of various layers into like parts of the costume and so on. And yeah, that's been absolutely beautiful. But that it's like a constant learning. There is so many layers as well to the unlearning, aren't there? To the becoming consciously conscious instead of unconsciously unconscious, or in the case of H&M, consciously unconscious.
Yeah.
And I think it's that constantly striving to do the best that we can, and to continue to learn and to unlearn, which essentially is that, you know, is that powering up, isn't it? It's being powered up to make choices. And yeah, for me, that choice is, I am committed to slow fashion. And for example, Tasleen McKay on next week. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I think these are such great examples of companies that we can support, where we even get to know the amazing human behind,
yes,
and the ethoses of the amazing humans behind the fabrics and behind the fashion.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the Power Up Power Team.
I'm Ella Mesmer.
I am Amma Rouge. And we are Power Up Podcast.